So we left off at Genesis 32:11, and where we are is Jacob's trying to find grace from Esau. So he's hoping his heart would change. So we see him doing things in his own strength. And what God's trying to teach him is, this is a work I'm going to do, which we will see later on in the story anyway. So we see Jacob dealing with things in his own way, and we see that it doesn't work. It just makes things worse. So here he's praying for deliverance in verse 11. So God must be saying, you're not at that level of faith yet. You're not at that level of trust for me to do what you want right now. What you want is Esau to soften his heart, to change his heart. But I need you to get to a point of surrender, self-surrender, surrendering all. Because why? Jacob's messed up. He's got issues. So if Esau responds positively and gives Jacob just what he wants, he may not reach that level of development God's trying to do in him. Israel, the best of him may not come out, and the worst of him, Jacob, and his deceiving ways may remain Jacob, or may remain deceiving and continuing to deceive and doing things in his own strength. So the root won't get plucked out. The issue may remain in him. So he won't see his issue in its true light. So this is where God wants him to get him. So God allows him for a moment to go through this for a short while. But God says, I'm going to be with him anyway. I'm going to be near to him. I'm going to come to him this night. I'm going to give him my presence. But it didn't look like how it normally looks like. Jacob didn't see God's presence for what it really was. And he wrestles because he thinks the presence is an enemy. So he's wrestling that night, and he's seeing his issues, he's seeing the root of his issues. And he wrestles and wrestles, until he wins, But he sees how dysfunctional he was. He sees, the root of his issue. He sees why he became the way he sees why he is. He sees why he is. No, that doesn't make sense. He sees his deceiving ways. He sees how lack of faith he had in God. He sees his lack of trust. He sees his cunningness, and he sees his self-reliance and all these kind of things. So all these things get uprooted, but he sees it all in its true light. So Emma, you want to read verse 11? Okay, I'll read it. So, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and my mother with the children. So, what's he praying for, specifically?
Deliverance from Esau.
Why?
Because he still has that fear that Esau's going to kill him.
So he's praying for deliverance because he fears Esau will come and kill him and smite him and his family.
And his family.
So this is what Jacob's fearing. This is how deep this revenge looks. If you just look at Esau for a minute, he's holding on to this revenge or this hatred for 20 years. And you'd be surprised how many years someone can go by having something bitter in their heart, some negative feeling towards someone. If they haven't dealt with it, you'd be surprised how long it stays within them. Like someone who's probably done you wrong. And Esau was done wrong, and this is something what he's held on to. He only lets go when Jacob gets to the point of dealing with the issue, and God causes him to let this go. There's 20 years of having this in your heart towards him. So verse 12. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So Jacob's reminding God what God said. He's reminding him of the promise. Surely, look, God, you said that you're going to do me good and make my seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be multitude. So what he's saying is, good's going to happen. You're going to do good to me, and I'm going to live because I have to, produce my seed, which is going to be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be multitude. He's saying this for a reason. For me, it's saying, he said this, but my circumstances tell me different. And my reality tells me different. I feel like I'm going to die. So is this promise going to come to pass? How are you going to do me good? Because I don't see good coming to me right now. So is he thinking God's going to allow this to happen to him? To smite him?
How many children did he leave Laban with? What was that? Did he get all of his 12 children there?
Not all of them, because Benjamin's not born yet.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
But Joseph is, isn't he? I think he's got 11 now.
Yes, something like that, yeah.
And possibly Dinah as well, actually.
So he doesn't have to have just one man.
Yes.
Does he know how many he's going to have? So.
No, because he's already got most of his seed.
Yeah. So he doesn't pursue his journey. He's come to kind of a standstill. So he's believing God will allow him, Esau, to kill him. After God has already gave him the promise. And it's a hard test. When God says something and your circumstances tell you contrary, something different, totally opposite. So Esau, the reality is, Esau is coming with 400 men. And the last message he received from Esau was, he's going to kill him when his father dies. His mom's going to come and call him when his wrath calms down, and all is forgotten, but that hasn't happened. So Jacob hasn't got any more light on how Esau feels or what Esau's going to do. So his mom didn't call, his mom died. So the wrath is still kindled in Esau 20 years later. Now Esau has the opportunity to get him, so he's coming with an army of 400 men. So verse 13. Emma, you want to read verse 13 to 20?
Yeah, sorry. I went to do it last time and it didn't work for some reason. I think I didn't press the mute properly. Okay. And he lodged there the same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou, and whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second, and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when you find him. And say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me.
So, how many times did Jacob send these presents?
It looks like 3.
3 times, yeah. And what was there any response?
No, there's not any response now written.
So, specifically, what does Jacob want?
What did you say?
Specifically, what does Jacob want?
He wants to appease Esau. He wants to placate Esau's anger and calm it down. Yeah.
So is that the reason why he's sending his presents?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he can get this pardon, this forgiveness, this, let him off.
Yeah.
Off the hook. Yeah. So he's giving him. Sorry?
It's out of fear of Esau that he wants to do this, because he's afraid himself that Esau's going to do something. So he says, let me just show him how nice I am.
So he's doing it out of fear, yeah?
Yeah.
This is why he's praying for deliverance. So he's praying for deliverance, but then he starts to work out how this deliverance is going to take place. Because he's doing something now thinking, okay, God deliver me, but you know what, let me try to secure my own safety. Let me do this, hoping if I do this, this will appease him. This will change his heart if I do this. So he's just doing it in his own strength, in his own way. And this is what he's accustomed to do. Well, this is what he's programmed to do from his early years. Yeah. So this is the level of faith where he's at. This is why God cannot change his heart right now. I mean, change Esau's heart right now or answer his prayer. Because God has to deal with this. Doing things in his own way, in his own strength, and not relying on God. When God has already gave him angels, as we read in the last podcast, he's already gave him angels. And why are the angels there? He gave him a host of angels, and Jacob sees. Well, Jacob says, oh, this is God's host. He sees an army of angels. And they're there for what? For protection. So God gave him these angels, this band of angels, of two camps, what Jacob sees, for his protection, because God knows what he's going through. And God shows him, okay, I've got you. You're praying for deliverance in verse 11, but I've already answered. I've got you on this one. But God knows Jacob's not going to, just walk with the angels. God knows he's going to try to secure his own safety in his own strength. But God showed him anyway to remind him, when it comes to the point of getting to the level of faith where he's at, he's going to see that God was with him all along, showing him that he's with him, showing him that he's protecting him. And Jacob has to see that and recognize, God already showed me, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't really see it clearly for what it really was. I seen it in parts, but now I see it. And I've seen how God was leading me in the past. So 3 times he pleads, but there's silence. There's silence. He didn't need to be pleading. But this pleading, it's not a parallel, but it reminds me of Jesus in Gethsemane. Jacob doesn't want to drink this cup of death. He's pleading, but he's pleading with the wrong man really, but he doesn't want to face this. But he has to. We see Jesus pleading in the garden. And this is an opportunity for Satan to kind of let loose on Jacob. To really try and impress Jacob. Ellen White says that. But even for Jesus, this moment of darkness, this is where Satan kind of let loose on Jesus. It was a struggle for Jesus, to drink that cup. But he had to drink it, and his life was taken. He was left alone in the garden with no support. Well, he's hoping to get support of his brethren. He came to them hoping for some encouragement, but it wasn't there. So he had to deal with this alone. But he didn't have to deal with it alone. We've seen pleading and pleading, 3 times. So something about this 3 times and pleading. I think it's somewhere else in the Bible. I can't remember. But we see Jacob sending his servants, and there's no response. And he wants something. He wants to hear something back, but he's discouraged and he's in distress. And then this is where he decides to spend time alone with God. So verse 21.
With Jacob, there was a certain amount of, even though God had told him he was with him and showed him lots of things that he was with him, there was still a certain amount of unbelief.
Yeah. So let's go to the next document. So verse 21. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. So he's lodging there that night, wherever he is. So we'll stop there and go to the document. Emma, if you want to read these quotes again.
Okay,
You should read the first two.
yeah. So this is Patriarchs and Prophets 195.1. Though Jacob had left Padanaram in obedience to the divine direction, it was not without many misgivings that he retraced the road which he had trodden as a fugitive 20 years before. His sin in the deception of his father was ever before him. He knew that his long exile was the direct result of that sin, and he pondered over these things day and night, the reproaches of an accusing conscience making his journey very sad. As the hills of his native land appeared before him in the distance, the heart of the patriarch was deeply moved. All the past rose vividly before him. With the memory of his sin came also the thought of God's favour toward him and the promises of divine help and guidance. And then this is Signs of the Times, November 20th, 1879, paragraph 1. The sinful course which Jacob had pursued in deceiving his father was ever before him. He knew that his long exile was the result of his own deviation from strict integrity, the law of right. He pondered over these things day and night, his conscience accusing him and making his journey very sad. How he longed to again go over the ground where he had stumbled and brought the stain of sin upon his soul. Before his transgression he had a sense of God's approval, which made him brave under difficulties and cheerful amid trouble and gloom. To this deep abiding peace he had long been a stranger, yet he remembered with gratitude the favour which God had shown him, the vision of the shining ladder and the promises of help and guidance. In solemn review of the mistakes and errors of his life, and the dealings of God with him, he humbly acknowledged his own unworthiness, the great mercy of God, and the prosperity which had crowned his labours.
So she goes into more detail of she kind of gives a reason why. And we figured it out, but she gives a reason why God had to send the angels. Why did he have to send the angels? We've got more light now, or more detail. What's Jacob doing on his journey, and what's happening?
Well, he's doing a review of his past mistakes, and he's reflecting on all of the events that have led him to this point in his life. So, and why he feels the way he does. And he's got this remorse and sorrow for his sadness, for the way that he's behaved. He recognises his sin against Esau and against Isaac when he asked about the deception of his father was before him, it says in the first one. And then it contrasts the fact that he had God's approval before and he doesn't seem to have it now. He seems to be overwhelmed with his own discouragement. But at the same time, he remembers the promises of God for help and guidance and how God has led him to this point and prospered him.
Yeah.
Because I think sadness is the overwhelming, and we know from fear, from the other things we've read, that the angels are sent to give him that comfort and protection.
Yeah, so it makes sense why the angels came and met him that night, because of what's going on in his mind. So God has to show him these angels.
But it's also interesting, this paragraph, the first probably couple of sentences, where it says, as the hills of his native land appeared before him in the distance, the heart of the patriarch was deeply stirred. That reminds me of Joseph, as he's leaving his father's land when he was in the wagon and he was going into Egypt. He started to remember the things of his father, what his father used to tell him about God. And now this year is Jacob remembering all the promises and what God had did for him. So the parallels between the son and the father are very similar.
Yeah, surroundings are bringing back memories.
I was going to say external events are triggering past things.
Yeah, so he's seen it vividly before him. Yeah. So the next quote.
So it's paragraph 2 of the same article. As the hills of his native land appeared before him in the distance, the heart of the patriarch was deeply stirred. He had proved his God and found his promises unfailing. He believed that God would be with him, yet as he drew near to Edom he had many fears of Esau, who was now able to do his younger brother great injury if so disposed. Again the Lord encouraged the heart of his servant with a token of divine care and protection. Directly before him, as if leading the way, he beheld 2 armies of heavenly angels marching as a guide and guard. And when he saw them, he broke forth in language of praise and exclaimed, "This is God's host!" And he called the name of the place Mahanaim, which signifies 2 hosts or camps.
So, what did he see?
Do you want to read the next one as well?
No, not yet.
2 armies of angels.
Yeah.
So specifically, give me more details. What's he seeing? What does anyone say he's seeing?
The heavenly angels marching alongside him as a guide.
Yeah, so this is what he's seeing. This is why.
One on one side and the other on the other side.
Yeah, so this is why he calls it God's host, because he names it based on what he sees. So he calls the place Mahanaim, which signifies 2 hosts. So in the verse it tells us he sees an army and he sees them in 2 hosts, basically walking with him.
Yeah, so came to the conclusion that an army is not necessarily an army as we see it, with weapons or just as soldiers. The kind of idea that we have an army as it could also be a company.
Yeah. So we've seen that the Lord had to do this to encourage the heart of Esau and gave him a token of his divine care and protection. So this was a token showing him these angels. So God knows that, okay, now Esau has an opportunity to do great injury. And when he knows how Jacob feels, so this is God's response to that. Before Jacob even prays about it, God responds anyway. So my next quote.
Again the Lord granted Jacob a token of the divine care. As he travelled southward from Mount Gilead, 2 hosts of heavenly angels seemed to encompass him behind and before, advancing with his company as if for their protection. Jacob remembered the vision at Bethel so long before, and his burdened heart grew lighter at this evidence that the divine messengers who had brought him hope and courage at his flight from Canaan were to be the guardians of his return. And he said, "This is God's host," and he called the name of that place Mahanaim, 2 hosts or camps.
Okay, there's nothing really much new in that. So
This says about them being in front and behind. It just reminds me of the pillar of cloud and fire in the wilderness with the Israelites. That
Yeah.
they've got that visible presence that God is before them and behind them, because they get attacked from behind as well as from the front. And so this is like all-round protection. It just gives that, conjures up that image that if he's got this host or this group of angels around him, nothing can touch him.
yeah, they have to go through the angels first.
Yeah.
This is for a lesson for Jacob to realize that Esau would have to go through the angels either behind or in front. So which was impossible to do. So the next one.
Although Jacob had so great evidence that God would protect him, he felt that he himself had something to do for his own safety. He therefore sent his servants with a conciliatory message to Esau, who dwelt at Mount Seir in the country of Edom. He did not claim the precedence for himself, but courteously addressed his brother as a superior, hoping thus to appease the anger which his former course had excited. Esau was informed of his younger brother's safe return with abundant possessions of cattle and servants, and that he would be most happy to meet him with fraternal feelings. The messengers returned to their master with the tidings that Esau was advancing to meet him, attended by 400 men, and no response was sent to the friendly message.
Yes. So if he didn't send a message, it says Esau was informed of his younger brother's safe return with all this possession and wealth. and then the message returned that Esau's coming to meet him with 400 men, and there was no response to the friendly message. So if Jacob didn't send a message to Esau, and I'm thinking maybe Esau wouldn't have made his way, because Esau wouldn't have known that he was coming. So all this wouldn't have happened with Jacob fearing and being in great distress and praying for deliverance. If you just... So it says, if Jacob didn't feel to secure his own safety and just rested in God's presence, or rested in God's provision of the angels, would all this have happened? The time of trouble and the night of wrestling, would all this have happened?
I think if he had full trust in God and full belief in, because the evidence was all around him, then no, it would not have happened, because he would have trusted God.
So did Jacob bring it upon himself?
Yes, because of lack of trust, because of unbelief.
Because it says he felt that he needed to do something for his own safety, for his own sake, but God already provided for that thing what he's trying to do. That's what he doesn't realize. You're trying to do something, but God's already done it for you, but you don't realize, because your eyes are kind of closed or dim, or you just feel like I need to do something in my own strength as well. There's certain things where you do need to play a part in probably answering your own prayers, but there's certain things we need to recognize that God has already done. But because of any issue, you cannot see clearly. This is where God allows things to come upon you, to get you to the point where you can see clearly.
How would we recognize that? You said there's certain things that we would recognize.
There's certain things, everyone's situation is different. I think with Jacob's example, he had an issue, what he had to wrestle with at Jabbok, and because of that issue, he couldn't see clearly. So only when the issue's dealt with, he sees clearly what his issue was. So his specific issue was dealing with things in his own strength. So this is the example we get from Jacob. Because of his issue, he cannot see God's presence when he's wrestling. Only after he wrestles, he realizes God was here. I seen God face to face. At Bethel, he doesn't realize God's with him. He thinks God's forsaken him. He believes that. But that wasn't the fact. Only after he had this vision, he realized God was in this place and I knew it not. So God is with us. God was there with him, but he didn't realize, because his eyes were closed because of his issue, his lack of faith as well. Until he comes to a point where he realizes God was here and I knew it not. What I call the abandonment, now I'm calling it God's presence. God was here with me all along. But I called it abandonment earlier on before I had this vision. I called it something else, but now I'm calling it this. I'm calling it God's presence. So
that sentence where it says Esau was informed of his younger brother's safe return with abundant possessions of cattle and servants, and that he would be most happy to meet him with paternal feelings. So is that saying that Esau, after receiving the presents that Jacob had sent him, would have been happy to meet with Jacob?
No, it's both parts of the sentence are saying what Jacob's saying. So Esau's informed that his brother is returning with all these presents, and that Jacob would be most happy to meet him with brotherly feelings. This is the message that Jacob sent ahead.
Yeah.
Because it says that there was no response to the friendly message. So we don't know how Esau feels about it.
Oh, so that's how Jacob would have viewed Esau if he had received the present.
Yes.
That's how Jacob would have wanted it to be.
Yes, he's informed that Jacob's coming with these presents and is happy to meet Esau.
Okay.
Your brother's following after, and it's a positive thing.
So what we see is Jacob is doing something, sending presents, hoping to receive a friendly message back, to receive a nice response, but it doesn't work. Basically, his efforts, all this effort, it doesn't work, and we see later on when he does begin to deal with the issue that he has, God sends an angel, the same angel from the same band that's protecting him, to Esau to soften his heart. So God does all that work what Jacob's trying to do himself, and then Jacob meets Esau and they have a happy reunion. So God does all the work, but God says, I'm not doing this work yet. You're trying to do this work, but I'm going to leave you to do it. I'm going to show you that it's not going to work, but I want you first to deal with the issue first. The issue is blinding. You have seen my divine protection and care. I need you to deal with the issue first, then I will deal with Esau. Just continue marching on with the angels.
And his issue is he really doesn't trust God, does he?
Yeah.
So he thinks, God has said these things, but I don't really trust him, so I've got to do something to help him. And that's the problem we see all through Scripture. Well, at least up to that point with Abraham and with Isaac. They don't really trust God to protect them when they go in the situation with their wives and they lie about them. And then Abraham and Sarah, although it's obviously been a very long time before they have this child, they don't trust that God's going to do it in his way, so they do Hagar. And it's the same with Jacob from his birth. He's just not trusted Esau over the birthright, not trusted his mum and dad that they're going to, his dad maybe, that he's going to give it to him. He's constantly scheming how to get it, instead of saying, Lord, you said you're going to give it to me, you give it to me, you sort it out. And I think that's what each of us has, a lack of trust in God in this area. And he's trying to show us that you're not really trusting me in this area, you're still going about it, trying to sort it out. So it's what that looks like in our own experience that we need to think about.
And you know what? A lot of times God does answer us, and the thing what we're praying for, it could be right in front of our faces, right in front of us, and we just don't know it. We're blind to it. So what was in front of Jacob's face? What was right there? What he's praying for in verse 11?
The host of angels. No, that's what it's saying.
Yeah, God's given him what he's asking for before he even asks. Actually, it's right there in his face, but he sees it in part. He doesn't really fully recognize it, and it's the same with us. Sometimes we've got what we need in front of us, or what we're even asking for, but we can't see it because of our issue. Our eyes just cannot see because we're looking somewhere else. We want something done in a certain way, so we're praying, God, I want you to do this or deliver me or whatever, but this is how I imagine it in my head, and because I'm not seeing it in my head how I see it in my head, I'm troubled now. But sometimes God does things in his own way, and it's for us to get nearer to God, to see, for our eyes to be opened up. What is God doing?
And I think although he's seen them, his feelings are wrestling against it. So he's seen the angels, and in that momentary glimpse he says, oh yeah, God's with me. And then that fear just overwhelms him again, so he allows the feelings to control. And then because the feelings are overwhelming, instead of praying through the feelings and saying, you know what, take them away, he's going all out to get rid of the feelings, which is the symptom.
He doesn't need,
wrestling with God and saying, look, you need to take this away because you've said that you're with me, but I don't feel like you are.
It doesn't allow faith to change the reality. The reality is, or the fact is, that Esau is coming with an army of men. That's reality, it's true. It's contrary to what God has said, or God has provided, like the angels, but the faith will change the reality, because the faith changed reality when Jacob was wrestling. The angel was sent to Esau to soften his heart, so that reality was changed, that fact was changed, but it was changed through faith. When Jacob was holding on to Christ in that wrestle, Christ was able then to kind of change reality on Jacob's behalf. But Jacob's trying to do it in his own strength, without faith. And without faith that, it wasn't, God didn't allow it to be done, basically. So, the next quote.
Which one are you up to? Sorry, Practice of 195.4?
Yeah, that one.
Yet Jacob felt that he had something to do to secure his own safety. He therefore dispatched messengers with conciliatory greeting to his brother. He instructed them as to the exact words in which they were to address Esau. It had been foretold before the birth of the two brothers that the elder should serve the younger, and lest the memory of this should be a cause of bitterness, Jacob told the servants they were sent to my lord Esau. When brought before him, they were to refer to their master as thy servant Jacob, and to remove the fear that he was returning a destitute wanderer to claim the paternal inheritance. Jacob was careful to state in his message, I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight.
Something from this one I picked up is where it refers to I'm your servant Jacob. It's funny because God already told Esau, well, through Isaac, that you're going to be the servant for Jacob. You are the servant, and this is why the main reason why Esau was mad, wanted to kill Jacob, because he doesn't want to be a servant. But he lost it. Jacob stole what was given to him, so now he has to become the servant. But Jacob's telling Isaac now, Esau, that you're my Lord and I'm your servant. Just to remove the fear of Esau thinking he's returning to claim something. So Jacob, designed his message carefully to remove any fear in Esau. So it reminds him that I'm your servant, and I have all this wealth, so I'm not coming to claim any type of wealth or inheritance like that. So again, I was gonna kind of pick up back on the point of doing things, trying to answer your own prayers, and God's already answered it, or He's already given you the tools, the wisdom in whatever situation you're in. Sometimes He does that, and we don't realize, because it's an issue that gets in the way of seeing clearly what God has done. An issue of maybe of anxiety or distress or fear or insecurities, whatever it is, self-doubt. These things get in the way of seeing clearly what God can be doing or showing us in our lives. And we see this example in Jacob. Jacob should have seen that these angels are there, and he needs to rest in what he sees and what these angels are provided to do. He should have stayed and just rested in it and continued marching on. But he allowed the issue of fear, undealt with issues, to rise up. So he's just troubled. So this brings him to the time of trouble. So let's read the next one. PP 196.1. Emma.
But the servants returned with the tidings that Esau was approaching with 400 men, and no response was sent to the friendly message. It appeared certain that he was coming to seek revenge. Terror pervaded the camp. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He could not go back, and he feared to advance. His company, unarmed and defenceless, were wholly unprepared for a hostile encounter. He accordingly divided them into two bands, so that if one should be attacked, the other might have an opportunity to escape. He sent from his vast flocks generous presents to Esau, with a friendly message. He did all in his power to atone for the wrong to his brother and to avert the threatened danger. And then in humiliation and repentance he pleaded for divine protection. Thou sayest unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant, for with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children.
Yeah, so Jacob's saying, I thought, you said you'll do well for me. And God's like, I am doing well with you. I provided you two angels, an army for your protection, to calm your fears. But now you've gone and done this. You've showed lack of faith and sent messengers to Esau, and this is what's happened. This is the response. Terror has pervaded the camp. This didn't have to happen. Jacob didn't have to go through this great distress and fear. So now he's stuck now in the middle. He can't go back. He can't go forward. What shall he do? So he's stuck there that night. You know. So Ellen White says he done all in his power to atone for the wrong to his brother and to avert the threatened danger. So he wouldn't have known all this if he didn't send a message to Esau. He wouldn't have known, or Esau wouldn't have came. So all this didn't have to happen, which I'm trying to say. So now he's pleading more. His level of prayer is getting more intense now. He's pleading more. He's reminding God of his promise. You know, he's reminding God of what God said he will do. I don't know if it's kind of doubting what God said, but he's saying now I'll become two bands. God didn't ordain him to become two bands. God didn't order this. Jacob brought this upon himself. He didn't have to become two bands. God provided him two bands already, basically. So it's a demonstration of Jacob doing things, answering a prayer in his own way, but God's already answered it for him. You know,
I think that's what happens with us. It's like we get overwhelmed with the circumstances, and we see all the wrong we've done, and we see the events that have led up to this point, and we feel trapped that, I've come this far, I can't deny the truth I know, or I can't deny what I've done, and I wish I'd done something different, but now it's too late, and now and it's that fear of going forward. It cripples people, and it cripples him in this situation. He just doesn't know what to do, but it gets him to the place where he recognises he's got no goodness, he's got no solution to the problem, and he has to rely upon God now. I can't do anything more than I've already done. He's at the end of his rope, as it were.
Yeah, he's at the end, and it's good.
Yeah, because now the only place he can go is Christ.
Yeah.
And that's like with us. So God allows our extreme circumstances often to drive us to our knees, to drive us to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, these extreme circumstances, do they feel good?
No.
If we be honest, it doesn't. But, and we won't see it as a presence of God. We won't see it as God. We'll name it something else.
Oh yeah.
Normally.
And he's looking at also about the lives of everybody around him is threatened. He feels bad for his wives and children, and so often we look at our circumstances and we look at all the people around us and how it's impacted them negatively, and we just think, oh, what a mess. I've been such a mess. So you feel that weight of guilt as well about everything else around you. Your parents, your children, your friends, the people in the church who've been conservative to you. All those things come up to haunt you about the way you've treated people or the impact it's had on them as well.
Yeah. So it's just, these circumstances that, we can give them all types of names. God's left me, he's neglected me, or he's not heard me. It's just, we can name things in one season, but in the next season we can look back and say, okay, no, that was God. It's like Jacob done the same thing when he's wrestling, when he feels he's wrestling with an enemy. He's calling it one thing there, but I think it's verse 28. He's calling it God. This is an angel. So in one point of his life, he's calling something pain or an issue or an enemy, and then later on he's calling it, no, this is not enemy, this is God. But it's the experience of wrestling, or the experience of this wrestle, what doesn't feel good. So we are tempted to call it pain, rejected from God or abandoned. But later on, if you endure until, say, verse 28, you'll be calling it God. God was here and I knew it not. This was God and I knew it not. So you can you'll be calling your situation one thing, but later on you'll be calling it something else. You'll be calling it God. But it's hard to see that while you're in that situation, where you're tempted to call it something else other than God. It's not easy.
Especially when you feel like you're gonna die, and you're calling out to God, and He's like, you feel like He's not there.
So you want to call it something else, don't you? But if you endure, if you wrestle and get to the root of the issue, what will you be calling it? Because who's come out? Israel will come out. Israel, the overcomer. That's what it means. A prince with God. You'll be naming it something else. I've wrestled with this in prayer. And now I can see God was there. Like at Bethel, it said God was in his place and I knew it not. When he knew it not, that's when he thought he was abandoned and cast out and left alone by God. He thought God wasn't there because he's praying and there's no answer and it's silent and there's no relief and he's burdened and distressed and there's no answer from God. So he feels God's abandoned him. So he called it one thing there, but after the vision at Bethel, he calls it God was here. He calls it God. God was here, but I knew it not. So I called it something else other than God.
So we give up. Then there must be a fact, something that we give up too quickly.
Yeah, depending on how strong or weak your faith is, yeah. So, Emmy, you want to read the last two paragraphs and we close there?
Yeah. So this is Signs of the Times again, paragraph 4 and 5. It appeared certain that Esau was coming in anger to seek revenge. A feeling of terror pervaded the entire camp. Jacob was in distress. He could not go back and he feared to advance. His company was few in numbers and wholly unprepared for an encounter. He accordingly divided them into two bands, that if one should be attacked, the other might have an opportunity to escape. He would not fail to do all in his power to preserve his own life and the life of those dependent upon him. And then he pleaded with God for his presence and protecting care. He did not rely upon his feelings, nor upon any goodness which he possessed, but on the sure promise of God. Thou sayest unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now am I become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children.
So let's go over this again. She said he pleaded. Okay, yeah, it appears certain that Esau was coming in anger to seek revenge. So that was a fact. So it received this fact back, and yeah, feelings of terror pervaded the camp. Yeah, it's reasonable. Yeah, Jacob was in distress. It's reasonable if he received this news. And then what does he pray for? He says he pleaded with God for his presence and his protecting care. So he's pleading to God for this. So did God answer this before he pleaded?
Yes.
With the angels. Yeah. So this prayer doesn't need to take place then?
No, but now it's
for his sake, isn't it? Jake?
Yeah.
You're going to say something, Emma, as well?
I was going to say, now he's gone through everything he can do. He gets that place where he can pray this prayer now.
Yeah.
Like, I've done everything I can do and I still feel afraid.
Okay, so God says, okay, I gave you my presence and protecting care, so you need more from me now. So what more does God give him? When it comes to his presence.
The promise.
No. It's something about his presence. When he's wrestling, what does God do with his presence? How does he appear? Well, it kind of tricks him, doesn't he?
Yeah, deception, really.
God says, okay, I'm going to give you my presence, what you're praying for, but it's not going to look like what you think. Because the presence I'm going to give you is going to cause you to get to your issue. It's going to cause you to wrestle in prayer. So that's the presence I'm going to give you. And it's a presence, usually, that we don't want. That presence we don't like. It can bring fear. And not all the time God's presence is likable or comfortable. We always pray for God's presence. God be with us. But sometimes he does it in a way where it may seem God's not with us. It may seem different. It may seem strange. Like Jesus walking on water at the darkest night towards the disciples. That's God's presence. That's Emmanuel, God with us. But it was strange. It caused fear in the disciples. It turned up in a way they didn't expect, for a specific reason, but still, God shows up sometimes in strange ways, and it's uncomfortable. And I think that's what we have to get used to. We have to understand that. We have to learn that. Stop calling it the presence of the devil, even though the devil was there, but still. So God gives him his presence that night. But Jacob interprets it as an enemy. Well, God turned up because he knew he will think that's what it is. That's why God turned up like that. But it worked out for good because it caused him to wrestle in prayer. So the last quote, you want to read that?
Jacob halted in his journey to mature plans for appeasing the wrath of his brother. He would not rush recklessly into danger, but sent large presents to Esau by the hands of his servants, with a message well calculated to make a favourable impression. He sent his wives and children with all his substance forward on the journey, while he himself remained behind. He thought the sight of that helpless little company would touch the feelings of Esau, who, though bold and revengeful, was yet pitiful and tender toward the weak and unprotected. If his eye rested first upon Jacob, his rage might be excited, and they would all perish.
Sorry, let's go back to the last quote. He said, even though where it says in bold, he did not rely upon his feelings, nor upon any goodness which he possessed, but on the sure promise of God. Now, is that true?
I was just looking at it thinking, it's true now that he's done everything else he can. Is that saying that once he's done all this, once he's separated the bands and sent the presents, now he has got no feelings left to rely upon because he's still afraid? He's got no goodness because he's given everything away, kind of.
Yes, because it did rely on his possessions.
Yeah, and he did, and he's kind of walking by his feelings.
And now it didn't work. He realised, okay, this is not working. So now, okay, yeah, I can see now he has to rely on the sure promise of God.
Yeah.
So it was. But now he's
And
not.
It's very interesting how it says in the next paragraph about maturing plans for appeasing the wrath. So he's still plotting and planning, and his reasoning is he would not rush recklessly into danger. It almost looks like Ellen White's saying it was a good thing he did because he doesn't want to go forward recklessly into danger.
So what Ellen White's saying, Jacob's behaviour seems totally contrast. Because this is not relying on the sure promise of God still.
No, but she doesn't make out so bad. It seems to be a good thing in a way.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah.
She kind of paints a picture, depending on what point she's making, but his behaviour tells it all. Like, you're still trying to do something in your own strength. And even that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So,
and it's always like he's reasoning that it would be reckless to run into danger, and of course he shouldn't do that. He shouldn't run recklessly into the danger. That would be presumption as well, to just, in some ways, if you have the bad attitude towards it, or overly confident perhaps, but he should just be wrestling with God on the floor going, Lord, you said you protect me.
So he continues to develop or mature his plans for appeasing the wrath of Esau. So he continues, basically.
Yeah.
He prays again, and he just continues. He doesn't stop. This man's unstoppable until God causes him to stop.
Yeah.
God has to kind of come to him in a certain way.
It's like he's overturned every stone. He's tried every tactic there is to sort this problem out, and finally he's got nowhere else to turn now, and he has to face God.
Yeah.
It's good to be unstoppable then, in that you continue to pursue the thing that, is needed for you. Because if he wasn't, he would have just given up and said, okay, that's it, I don't believe in God anymore. He hasn't come through for me, but I'm going to continue to pray.
Is that what you're saying? God doesn't come through for Jacob?
No, absolutely he does. I'm just saying it was good that Jacob was unstoppable. He didn't stop. He just continued to pray and ask God to help him in this, when like probably when everything wasn't happening, when he was doing things in his own strength, he didn't just give up and say, okay, that's it,
Oh,
God is not there for me. I'm going to stop now. I don't believe in God anymore. But he continued, and he continued to pray until
oh,
he admitted that, he was fearful.
yeah.
I guess it just took a lot longer than it should have done. Maybe.
Yeah, he went through
Or than
things.
it
He
had to.
didn't. He went through things he didn't need. He didn't need to go through.
Yes.
It's the same with us. Sometimes we go through issues and trials, the things we bring upon ourselves. We go through things that we don't need to go through.
But at the same time, it's almost like we have to go through it. It's so fun.
Yeah,
Because we won't learn it in any other way. And we do learn it good and proper then. Like you really learnt it.
yep, definitely. Yeah, so this story of Jacob is packed with many lessons. It teaches us about ourselves, who we are. We are Jacob. We've all got a Jacob in us. We've all got Israel in us. Depending on who do we fight to come, who do we fight to come out, Jacob or Israel? Who do we?
And how much we persevere with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we continue to be Jacob in our dysfunction? With our issues, do we allow it to take place, continue? Do we encourage it? Do we entertain it? Do we claim it as our identity? Or do we claim Israel as our identity? The one that God called out to represent the best of him. Or are we holding on to Jacob? Do we recognize Jacob in all its light? Or are we still learning? Are we striving to learn who we are and why we are the way we are? What are we doing?
And I think it's pressing close to God even when he looks like an enemy. Yeah, it's breaking through that barrier. It's like, I think Ellen White talks about exercising faith when the storm clouds are there. It's really pressing up with like the eagle through the storm clouds so you can fly in the sun above the cloud. And I think that darkness seeks to shut out Christ, and he looks like an enemy, like he does for Jacob here. Well, we haven't got to, we're just getting to the wrestling, but it's that really consistently pressing to Christ, like you said about keeping on trusting him, even when persevering, even when things you don't seem to get answered, or you don't seem to understand, or it's not giving up.
Yeah. And are we helping each other? Are we all encouraging the Israel in each and every one of us? Or are we encouraging the Jacob and his deceitful ways? Come here, Jacob, or come here, deceiver, or you manipulator. Are we calling them by their behavior? Are we putting them down? Are we insulting them? Are we encouraging these bad behaviors in people? Or are we encouraging the Israel, the overcomer? We're encouraging words, affirmations, things that will bring out the Israel. Who are we talking to? Also, who are we responding to? Are we responding to Jacob, or are we responding to Israel? Are we allowing the Jacob to come out of ourselves, or are we striving for the Israel to come out of us? Are we having that wrestle? So I'll continue on that thought maybe in the next podcast. So we'll close there.
Okay. Do you want to pray, Susie? Do you want me to pray?
You can.
Okay. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the story of Jacob. Although we see that he seems to have made mistakes in his journey, that he persevered and that eventually he became Israel, overcomer. And this is the desire of our hearts, Lord, that each one of us would persevere through this time of trouble, that we would become overcomers, that we would learn how to press close to your side even when you look like you're an enemy, when we don't understand you, when we don't understand how to read, and our hearts are troubled by the things we see going on around us. and by our own understanding of you and of your word. But we thank you for this encouragement that we can be victorious, that you are with us, that you are on our side, that angels have been sent to strengthen us too, and that we have so many promises in your word, that you will have a final generation who you will use to finish the work. Please help us to be part of that. We thank you for this day, and we ask that you would direct us to use it wisely, and that we would be a blessing to those around us. Please continue to give us your joy and your peace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.